Okay, we welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is a show where we profile a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. In each episode of this show, we interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a unique set of skills, knowledge, and information in a unique way. And in the process of interviewing and chatting with our guest, we hope to uncover a new definition of learning as imagined, conceptualized, and narrated by the guest on our show. Today's guest, Shreya Vajpei, is a dear friend. I mean, we've known each other for quite some time. We haven't been in touch as much, but I've followed her professional journey for quite some time now. And she's a lawyer by training and education. She completed a Bachelor of Law degree from the Army Institute of Law in Mohali in 2017. And I think that was a 5-year degree. Um,
Yes.
so, Shreya, after she completed her degree, she wore several different hats in the legal sector in India. Today, she is currently the assistant manager of innovation at Khaitan and Co., which is a prominent legal firm in India. And she also runs Prologue, which is this wonderful website that aims to bridge the information gap on the non-traditional roles in the legal sector in India. There, that's our first bit of noises. But this is a little bit about Shreya and her background. And Shreya, the reason I wanted to have this chat with you is because I've always looked at the way you looked at your career. Um, I think you've always thought about careers in a very non-traditional way, right? And I'm just thinking about how that thinking has evolved over time. So before you started Prologue and you're doing this innovation thing in the legal field, I want to go back to Shreya in school. Like what was Shreya back in the day? I know you grew up in Jaipur. So what was that like? What were some of your interests growing up? What was school like for you? Let's just get started there.
Um, sure. I did like the last 4 years of schooling from Jaipur, but otherwise, I am an army kid, so I've moved throughout the country and I've studied in various schools. The benefit of that has been that I've been in cities which were metropolitan cities in that sense, and I've been in really small towns where everybody knew everybody, right? So the interactions and the ecosystems were very different. And so, what's the learning in school? Because your mother would know the teacher and the teacher would know your entire family. So it was much more close knit in that sense, as compared to perhaps studying in Jaipur, where you had 45 kids in a class and you had 12 sections. And they have something really interesting in Jaipur because it's like an offset of something we've learned from Kota, right? So in Kota, a lot of people go to do their studies for IIT, JEE, and all other entrance exams, and they have devised this thing. I don't know if it's still legal or if it was ever questioned. They have something called dummy school, and dummy school is a very interesting concept. It means that you don't have to really go to school. The school will sort of allocate you enough attendance and let you do your internals and all of that, and you can just directly sit for the paper. And the time that you save, you can spend all of it preparing for that entrance exam.
Mm.
um, so I had a little bit of that also. So I think I'll just focus more on the last 4 years, because that really is the time where everybody's sort of questioning, right? What do you want to do? And you sort of pick a path based on societal pressures and parental pressures and what you want to do and what you think you want to do, which are very different things. Um, and yeah, of course, happy to chat about the time before that as well. So, because we were moving around so much since my father was in the army, we decided to come to Jaipur for the last 4 years so that it's quote unquote stable schooling in a bigger city rather than like, because people get posted everywhere, right? um so that happened for me, and I did my ninth and 10th grade. I was like, I think a slightly above average student, And the thing with slightly above average students who don't know what they want to do is that they end up doing sciences because it apparently has all options open. uh, but I had one more reason, which is that my mother has a PhD in organic chemistry. So I thought it'd probably pan out, right? And it just is very helpful to have somebody who knows a subject very well at home,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of conversations unconsciously, right? It's not always with the motive to teach you,
Yeah.
are about the subject that they know.
Sure.
So I knew things like Buckminster fullerene before it sort of came up in whatever ninth or 10th grade, right? Um, and just those kind of concepts, they're just taught to you conversationally over dinner, or because it was something that intrigued her. So she wanted to pass it on to me and to my younger sibling. And that gives you an edge of sorts, right? Because you have so much more context. Your understanding is a lot more holistic, if I can use that word. And it just makes learning easier, right? Because then what is being taught to you in the class setup from a book is still very fragmented,
Mm.
at least to my mind. But to have more context, to know that, oh, this is actually going to fit into a much bigger picture at the end of the day, just gives you so much more motive to learn that thing, or to sort of have that like that bigger complete picture in your head for sure. So yeah, then I studied sciences for 2 years, and I even did that dummy school thing, which is why I sort of brought up that concept.
Yeah.
But I think 3 months into it, I realized that a dummy school was not for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I really liked going to school. And I think a lot of learning in school, except for academics, is just, you there are a lot of people skills you will learn, and you sort of learn how to deal with uh, difficult teachers also.
Sure. Yeah.
um yeah. And I think one of the things that I really liked, and it's again part of that entire dummy school setup, right, where they'll give you like your fifth subject is going to be like a lighter subject, so you can focus on the main subjects. And I they give you like physical education by default unless you want to pick something else, um, which wasn't an active choice, but it worked out very well for me because it meant 1 hour of playing every day,
Yeah.
like a guilt-free pass. So I really enjoyed going to school because I could just like play every day.
Yeah.
And there'd be other people who playing, right? So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, after doing the 3 month of dummy school and I think 7 months of coaching for IIT, JEE, and other exams, I realized that that wasn't something that really interested me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as somebody who's had academicians in her entire house, right? Like my mom's a teacher, and a lot of other people in my family are in the education profession. I've always been fond of the process of learning. Like I want to learn more things, and I want to learn it, and it's never been for the marks, right? And that was another benefit that I had while growing up, because both my parents um were never about marks. Like I could fail or I could top, it didn't matter as long as I was learning and I was becoming a more holistic person, and I was doing the things that um allowed me to grow.
Sure.
So um in all of that, I sort of started to like relook what I was doing. And the thing that coaching was doing to me is that it was taking away that joy of learning, because it's all about, oh, there's a hack here and there's a hack there, and this is how you can score more marks. And beyond a point of time, it's not even about the concept. It's about just like mug it up, apply it, and move on, and then you'll get the points.
Yeah.
And so when that started happening, I started really relooking at my options. And again, I think wasn't really as thought out or as conscious, but I think it's the best that somebody back in the day could do with a little bit of internet. So I did the Myers-Briggs test, and I read about careers and sort of thought about the things I was good at. um, I participated in a lot of public speaking, so that was there.
Mm-hmm.
um, I read the Myers-Briggs test, and it told me, oh, these are the couple of careers you can sort of try out.
Hmm.
And it had psychology, it had journalism, and it had law.
Okay.
And all three sounded like immediately interesting
Nice.
for some reason. I mean, I must have probably thought about it or whatever, right? Like how people are displayed, because we've read Sherlock Holmes and we've seen Suits, and just how pop culture also sort of reinforces those professions, right?
Yeah.
All three seemed very interesting. And I spoke to my parents about it. But I think they were also very unsure with my decision making process. So they were like, okay, it makes sense to do law because A, it's a professional degree, and B, it will give me the chance to pivot to the other two, whereas the vice versa may not always be possible.
Sure.
So then I sort of decided to choose do law, and yeah, I think in law school, when I finally got introduced to a lot of these humanities subjects like political science or economics, I think the way that we are taught those subjects in school does a lot of injustice to those subjects, because they're very, very fundamental, and they really expand how you look at society, how you look at things, how you look at policy,
Yeah.
um, how you're thinking about political agendas, or political parties, or just the environment, or geopolitics for that instance, right?
And it's yeah, there's so much to actually know about and learn about there. That's and it's so hard to actually pick that up from a classroom environment, right? But a couple of things about what you said in the first few minutes, Shreya. That idea about figuring out your career so early in your life in a context, especially growing up in India, where there's a lot of pressure, um, especially just this unconscious societal pressure to uh, fit this larger model of what an ideal student is. And I completely get the thinking behind taking up the sciences, because that's the option that gives you the most chances down the line. And I also know what you're speaking about with the dummy school, because I was also in one of these institutions early on. And like unconsciously there's a lot of pressure, and there's this hierarchy at the back of your mind that it's the sciences, then commerce, and then the arts, right? So you sort of know that this is the hierarchy, and if you want to do really well in life, you have to be in a subject in the sciences. You have to be a doctor, an engineer, and then you've chosen law, which is probably the third big like sort of area kids should take up, which is good. But it's just such a confusing time, right, for all of us, in growing up and deciding which career to choose. I really like the process you adopted to choose that particular path, where you did that career and personality test, the Myers-Briggs test. But even the conversations with your mom, I thought that was really fascinating, how sometimes the earliest influences in our lives are the adults that grow up around us, right? And you notice that your mom was right there, and your dad also was in the army background. So I think growing up, you're constantly observing both your dad and your mom, and thinking about what it is like to be a professional in various settings, right? And I'm sure their own professional lives had an impact on you growing up, right, in terms of what path you had to choose. But also the army background, moving around from one place to another, I assume also gave you a lot of flexibility, just because at such a young age, to move from one place to another, you just have to constantly readjust your understanding of the world and your social circle, right? I think that's really difficult, especially through the teenage years, where you really want to form those social bonds. So kudos to you, for carving out that path within all these different sort of parameters and changes in your life. And I think that's really amazing how you went about doing that. I don't think I was as organized as you in terms of um, like choosing that career path. But even that decision to choose law, I think there's so much within this larger subcategory of law, and that's what I want to know more about for students that are interested in studying law. And I know you've done a lot of work on this, because when you were at university, you started a website called Blue Pencil, right, where you used to talk about the legal field. So for someone that is in that phase that Shreya was in grade 11 and 12, what does it mean to study law in India? you know, today? And what is the course structure like, and what was your experience there? If you had to break down that 4 to 5 year experience, for a person that is interested in the field, because I know a lot of young students listen to the podcast, so that would be really helpful, Shreya, if you can.
Sure. So there are two sort of pathways to do law. One is a 5 year BA LLB that you do after your plus two. The other, of course, is a 3 year LLB, which you can do at any point of time in your life. And in fact, recently, because I've had a few people reach out to me, there's definitely an uptake in the 3 year law because a lot of people are sort of picking it up to upskill themselves and or to pivot careers. And there are people who um, who've retired or are on the cusp of retiring but are picking up law so that they can do consulting, build their own business out of that. And the great thing about law, at least that was one of the things that really um, was what was the most interesting for me, is that you can be interested in space, or you could be interested in blockchain and cryptocurrency, or you could be interested in human rights, right? But law is one of those things that's going to sit in every single dimension of the world that exists. And if it doesn't apply there, then it's going to get there for
Mm,
sure, right? So even the fundamentals are same, and you'll probably learn the same course as I did.
mm,
But if you have interests that lie elsewhere, for say, I mean, gambling laws, or like I said, right, if you really want to see at how NFTs are working and how metaverse marriages are being recognized or being done, and those kinds of things also, right? So ranging from the absolute initial starting of world history where things started getting documented to what's going to happen, law is going to sit throughout it, and you can pick what you really want to do and what you're really, really passionate about. Um, Coming back to the course structure, the 5 year law is like the curriculum is governed by the BCI. So they have like a set structure that you need to follow, a couple of subjects that are going to get allocated to you every semester. Some law schools have a bi-semester system. Some law schools have 3 semesters in 1 year. So
mhm.
you like, I think NLSIU and NLIU have like 15 semesters in that sense, and most other law schools have 10.
And these are like
Uh,
the other law schools in India, the ones that you mentioned.
yes, so the way that the law schools are sort of divided is that you have the national law schools, which are state run and get state funding, and um, are also older. Of course, you have other old state and government law schools like the Government Law College, which is the oldest law college in Asia, and then ILS, which is in Pune. So there is this set. Then there's this other set, which is private colleges, which are also like some of them are doing exceedingly well.
Mhm.
For example, Jindal started fairly recently and already makes it to the QS World Ranking.
Right.
But then there are other law colleges also. So you have Amity and you have SLS, which also does very well, and a couple of other here and there. I think there are over 1,000 law schools in India,
Wow, okay.
which is like an insane number.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's a
there
lot,
is that.
that's a lot of lawyers coming out every year, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. A lot of them. Um, but I'll just sort of like, that's another thing that I would want to talk about perhaps a little later. I don't want to digress too much. Just coming back to the coursework, right? For the 5 year one, because that's what I studied. It's a BA LLB degree, but there is like a permutation and combination on that. So some law schools offer you a BBA LLB, which is Bachelor's of Business Administration, as well as a BSc LLB, which is Bachelor's of Science with LLB.
Okay.
Uh, there are benefits depending on what you choose, of course. Like BBA sort of allows you to just gives you that edge, and a lot of people from a practical standpoint do a CS course alongside. So then they have like a dual professional degree when they sort of step out. Um, BSc, LLB people are great people who can work in the patent side of things because they understand how patents work and they understand how the science behind a patent works. And in fact, a lot of companies require you to have a BSc or an engineering degree
Mm,
to become a patent lawyer.
mm,
BA LLB is the most common one. Subjects on the BA side really vary, but you will most likely have a combination of political science, economics, sociology, some legal history, a lot of legal English, because the way law is written is a little different, right? How judgments are written, and just trying to get a hang of that. And then of course you have the law subjects through those 5 years, which again there is going to be some permutation and combination here and there. You have a few electives, but some that are definitely going to be taught to you is the contract law, um, all your other commercial laws, which is your company law, and then you have the other set of things, which is family law, constitutional law, and your procedural laws, which is how will a court look at things, or how do you like go about a trial, and then all your criminal laws and other allied civil laws that sort of run with it. So that's broadly the structure of the 5 year course.
awesome. Yeah, and that's really fascinating how you broke that down, because there are so many pathways even within the area of law. And even that little point you made about law having something to do with every field, it just is really fascinating for someone that wants to, that has a very logical frame of mind, but is interested in different industries, right? So you can transfer your understanding in the legal field into different industries. But if you had to make a sales pitch to a young person that has so many other professions, like why should a person study law, like in the 21st century with so many other professions available?
Um, this is more of a practical advice pitch, perhaps. Is that I think everybody needs to know how the law works, and I think personally it's a shame that as a profession we haven't been able to make it more accessible to people who are non-lawyers, because the way we communicate and the way the law is written makes it sort of forecloses it to other people, right? Um, so that is one. Like definitely you need to know, right, how the common sense of the world is and what are policies being made on, and how does your country sort of look at things or look at a particular right and a particular duty. That is one. So I think just generally, even if you don't end up doing law, everybody should have basic legal literacy, because it just makes um like sort of allows you to make better decisions in life. um the second pitch would be what I've already spoke about before, right, which is what um worked very well for me, is that it's one of those things that you can study and then you can keep pivoting or keep moving industries or keep moving places depending on whatever your latest fancy is. And if you're one of those people who like doing multiple things, then this is a great spot to be in.
Mm,
The third thing is perhaps that it's one of those professions where it's reaching that cusp of great revolution, because for so long it's been traditional, right? And I mean, a great way to sort of explain this is that, and it's actually a very comparable profession, which is medicine, right?
mm,
They have ethics to follow, they have really high standards to follow. They are like not a business, they are a profession in that sense. But how surgeries were done 100 years back, right, where you would have equipment and which were like really big tools that looked like torture tools, and patients would be left open on the table and no sanitation and all of that, to today where you have closed stethoscope, like closed OTs, and you have robots that are sort of helping you do surgeries, and you have non-invasive surgeries, right?
yeah.
And now when you think of law, people were in the courtroom 100 years back, people are still in the courtroom 100 years since, right?
Mm,
But we've sort of reached a stage, and COVID has definitely accelerated that rate of change, because N- Now technology and just a lot of other factors within the profession and our clients in that sense, right? The people that law as an industry gives services to, and how they've become more complex and sophisticated and more demanding at the same point of time.
Right.
It's definitely is at a cusp of revolution, right? How we do things is changing very, very rapidly to sort of keep up with the times, the requirements, and the cost and business pressures. So, if you want to be part of an industry that's going under an overhaul, this is a great time to be part of that revolution, at least to my mind. And as a direct consequence of that, a lot of new pathways after doing law are opening up. Of course, I spoke about industry, but also there are a lot of new confluences and pathways that are opening up. So you now have mashups like legal design, which is design thinking principles applied to law.
Oh,
And you have something called legal project management, which is project management applied to law.
oh,
And you have a lot of startups that are working in the legal space. So it's something called legal tech,
right.
and some brilliant products and some great revolutionary mechanisms that are sort of being churned out at a very, very high stage.
Yeah,
So
as
yeah.
no, I like when I've been reading the work you've been putting out on LinkedIn and a couple of other sites, Shreya, and you've done a really good job documenting and archiving some of these major developments in the field. And I think as someone that also for someone that just graduated law school, right? There are so many different options. And what do people normally take up? Like, what is the general career pathway once you're done with law school? And then maybe we can jump into how we can look at that in a non-traditional way as well based on what you've experienced, because I know you were at two big law firms in India right after law school for about 3 to 4 years, but you were also working on your own projects on the side, right? So how did that work out for you right after law school?
The most common pathways are people will either go work for a law firm, um, or they would go work for a company in their legal department. So that's called in-house. Then the third pathway is to litigate, which is you practicing before a court with an arguing counsel
Sure.
in the hopes of becoming an arguing counsel yourself.
Okay.
Um, the fourth pathway is judiciary. So you can also sort of give those entrance exams and the judicial exams to become a judge. The fifth pathway is becoming an academician within this entire setup and this ecosystem. A sixth pathway is public policy, because law lies at the heart of policy, right? So you can work with all of these government organizations, or you could work with the teams of various MPs, MLAs, ministers, or you could work with any of these think tanks, and these are both national and international, right? Those policy-based think tanks. And of course, there also you can choose like a niche. So those are, and yeah, of course, there's a seventh pathway, which is working with an international organization. So your UN and your ADB or your World Banks will have lawyers, but they do a very different kind of work, because it's sort of running from international law and a lot of geopolitics and the like. So those are usually the 7, 8 pathways that you should ideally be told about when you enter law school, or you would hear about it, or you'd have somebody in your family doing it. Um, Apart from that, a lot of law students and people who practice pivot completely out of law. So a lot of people will do an MBA, or they would just do mergers and acquisition work at a law firm, or be in the private equity team at the law firm, and then pivot to a venture capital fund or a private equity fund, or and the like, right? So they'll move on the investment side from
Mm,
the lawyer side of things.
mm,
um, or I know a lot of people who now very recently, because of these startups coming up, right, have started moving into product development role, or product management roles, or I've started pivoting into even on the other side, like so there are all these project management roles within those startups and the like. So that's another one. I know a lot of lawyers who then did an MSc or a Masters of Arts and then moved completely separate. There are obviously a lot of skill sets that law school will teach you that are going to be there for the rest of your life, right? Like one is just how to critically read something
Sure.
and analyze it, because that's a major part of what we do, right? Which is reading, breaking it down, and sort of critically looking at it and saying what are the implications, what are the ramifications, and the like. Another thing, depending on what uh, another thing I think almost everybody sort of learns is just to be able to speak publicly, because you have a lot of competitions that sort of facilitate that and facilitate oral skills and vocalizing your thought and sort of vocalizing it in a way that you communicate it better, right? Where you can make an argument, build an argument, and communicate your point. Um, that, and I think third skill is an extension of the first one, which is to be able to research
Hmm.
and to be able to put down thoughts in a logical fashion. So
Nice.
that's, I would say, yeah, like analytical writing of sorts. And those three skills are completely fungible, right? In fact, yeah, in fact, a fourth skill also, because law is like a people system at the end of the day, right? So if you've worked for even a year or 2 years, you've interacted with multiple stakeholders, right? Your client, your boss, which is senior, the judge, the court clerk, the clerk at your office who's running around with files, your office staff that's helping you make reservations or bookings, or your secretary who's going to help you raise bills, your finance team. So just that, and then just managing everybody's expectations, managing client expectations, managing your senior expectation, your boss's expectation, really teaches you just how to be uh, more equipped with dealing with people as you go on. And that's like a fundamental skill beyond a stage in anybody's career, because at some point of time you will have a team that you'll have to work with.
Yeah. And that's really fascinating, Shreya, because you mentioned those four skills, and I think if nobody else, you've definitely convinced me about how law is such an interesting. I feel like I need to, because a lot of these things you mentioned are things I'm really interested in, and that seems like such an interesting sort of space to spend like a large amount of your professional life in, like research, oral communication, just being able to read something critically. These are skills that are very transferable, but also like you also made a good case for how law is diverse in different situations, because law in India in a particular state may be very different from law in another state in India, and then maybe comparing that to a province in or a state in America or Canada, right? So I think it also changes based on the context you're studying law in. So there's just so much to understand and study going forward. But jumping into your initiative, I know I want to be respectful of time because I know you have another engagement right after, but you started this website called Prologue, and I was looking at the brief for the website, and it aims to bridge the gap for the information between traditional and non-traditional roles in the legal industry, in the legal sector. So what was your thinking behind starting that website, and what gap do you think you were filling in terms of information with the website and the information that you provide over there, Shreya?
Sure. So I'll just go back a little bit to what I was talking about in terms of how the profession is at the cusp of a lot of like a major evolution, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And particularly in India. So if you look at EU, they are way ahead of us in terms of how the profession has evolved, how the delivery of legal services, right? Various mechanisms of how the services are being delivered
Mm.
has really evolved there. I'm not saying it's comparable to medicine, but there's definitely a huge delta between EU and India. US is also sort of catching up to EU, but they're really not there yet. And by that I mean is that they have stopped looking at this as a profession. And there have been a lot of changes that have come about, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way. I just mean it in an optimization way, right? Like, because a lot of people under the garb of profession have ensured that it's over traditional in nature. We stick to what we have been taught so far and not really question things or move things around. And that's not always optimum. And it's definitely not keeping up with the times. And a third thing that law has managed to do, sadly successfully, is foreclose non lawyers from entering the profession. Because as a non lawyer, you cannot give legal advice, right?
Mm.
Or as a non lawyer, you can't even build a product that helps me deliver legal services. But that's not the same as that's not the same for medicine, though, right? Like IBM can create a robot that can assist in surgery,
Mm.
but IBM may not be able to create a service or a software that allows for ease of legal service delivery.
Interesting.
That's sort of starting to change. So, for example, in UK now, you could be a non-lawyer and you can give a solicitor qualification exam. So they've just changed it, I think last year, in fact, and become a lawyer. You can become a solicitor. And Utah has created a sandbox of sorts where a software can give you regulatory advice based on the data set that's been plugged into it.
Wow.
It's still in the sandbox fashion, but there's progress there. So all of those things are happening. What is also happening is that just generally our usage of technology within how the legal services is being provided is really changing things up, right? Earlier, you would manually have to go through pages after pages after pages when you did this thing called due diligence, or you wanted to see the other party's files that you were litigating with them to discover if some document is going to be useful to make your case.
Mm.
And all of this used to be completely manual. Now you have softwares that can look at hours of manual hours of work in like a week or 10 days, and that turnaround time is 85 to like 95% more efficient.
Wow.
Of course there is error rate, right? And that's like the biggest argument against it, but there's also error rate in lawyers who've been exhausted beyond their efficiency point.
Sure.
The error rate is sort of comparable, I think. And of course, the best thing about software and technology is the more you train it, the better it gets. The more you sort of loop in feedback and improve it, right? It will keep getting better. So that error rate is going to change at the end of the day. So that's one. Sorry, actually that's two, because using tech, right? The third thing that is sort of happening is that there is a lot of client pressure on improving things, because a big MNC has so many different business processes in place, right? That when they look at a traditional law firm, they can't wrap their head around how we are still working like this in silos and, without proper planning and without scheduling and without budgeting, and some things which are very, very, very basic and common to a lot of MNCs. So that's happening because they're becoming more sophisticated, and lawyers within these companies also interact with all of their other business groups, right? So they know what's happening in that sense. That's another. The next thing that's sort of changing is a lot of cost pressure, because legal costs for a company are just out and out risk costs, right? They drain resources from a company. So whenever a company is using a law firm for legal advice, it's a cost to the company.
Sure.
Yeah. So they're trying to reduce those costs a lot. So that reduction of cost is directly being passed on to the law firms. So now, when before I could charge X rate, now I have to charge X, like 90% of X,
yeah,
or 85% of X, because just the client wants that now.
Yeah.
So that cost pressure directly translates into how much profit I was making.
Yeah. And also,
and now I have to.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. And it's a direct case for efficiency, right? Now I must be efficient.
Yeah. And I think even technology, right, Shreya, I think that also changes things a lot. Like, you spoke about medicine. Like I work in education, I'm a teacher. I've noticed how technology has changed how we deliver, services as educational professionals as well. Because in a lot of ways, students can access the information you share in the class from the internet, right? So what are you doing in the classroom that's very different? Similarly, I think, are there things technology can do that legal professionals don't have to do as much of now? Or can you work with technology rather than against technology? Rather than making it a fight where one has to win and the other loses, how can humans co-evolve with technology to create more jobs where, as humans, the due diligence work which you spoke about, if that is done by technology, maybe we can spend a larger chunk of our time on creating models and systems that make legal thinking more effective going down the line, right? And I think your approach with regards to looking at law from a design thinking sense is really innovative in that approach, because in the design thinking framework, the first thing you try to understand is empathy, right? You try to develop an understanding of the client or the person you're working for. And I'm familiar with this in the social enterprise setup, where you try to understand the problem and then go about creating a prototype that would, address that particular problem in that context. But what I've also noticed about the design thinking framework is that it's so iterative. When your first prototype is not the final solution in most cases, right? It is just the beginning of something that would evolve into maybe something that is much much bigger and much better. And there's no like judgmental sort of analysis of what your prototype is. It's just something that works in that situation. So like what are some kind of other because you've just given us so much information, Shreya. I'm just thinking about how, like, someone listening to this that's interested in law as a career, what are some other legal sort of professions they can look at today in today's society, according to you? And then maybe just one more question, because I want to wrap this up as well, just being respectful of your
Oh,
time. And then,
yeah.
so go ahead,
I'm
Shreya.
sorry. So I'll just go back because I don't think I really answered the earlier question about how prologue started, and then I'll quickly divert to this as well.
Sounds good.
So all of these things, right, that are really, really sort of turning up the entire profession are things that nobody's thought about. I mean, much later when you have to fight with the client is when you realize, oh, there are actually costing pressures, right? Or you're in a managerial position that you realize this is happening. Nobody's talking about this at a law school level, which is a little problematic, but it's something to be very, very mindful of, because this is definitely going to change. And a direct ramification of this change are the professions that are sort of now coming up, right? Which is, you now have a legal solution architect. A legal solution architect is somebody who's looking at problems in legal service delivery, or how a certain process is run, or they do it on a project to project basis, of course, but they come from multidisciplinary backgrounds, right? They're either engineers who did law, or they're lawyers who then upskill themselves to do something completely unrelated to law. Like they may have done data analysis, or they may have perhaps done some other course which has nothing to do with law. But all of these newer professions in that sense sit at a confluence of tech and business principles and the profession. So like I said, right, like you now have legal marketeers that are helping law firms and lawyers better build their own brand, or build the brand of their organization. Or you have legal operations managers that are sort of helping the legal departments in companies and even law firms just function a lot better. Then you have very, very hyper specific roles, right, that are sort of circling around the area of data analysis. So a lot of people, there's specific roles like pricing strategists. These are people who will help you price a matter better, looking at past data, right? And there are a lot of applications of data analysis directly relevant to all lawyers and all professionals. Then you now have, because there's a lot of tech being adopted, you now have change management specialists and agile coaches, right, who sort of come in, help you adopt a new technology, move away from old processes, right? But there's usually a lot of friction whenever anything of that sort happens. So they come in and they sort of help you plan it, deploy it, follow up, train people, take feedback, take questions. So there's that entire set. And very honestly, at this stage, you could, I mean, irrespective of what you've done, right? You can just be whoever you want to be. And internet has really facilitated that. A and B, I think startups have really facilitated that. So I could have done law and I can then join, let's say, a legal tech startup, right? Because I'm sort of the subject matter expert there. But in startups, you're doing everything. Like you could be the one building the website one day, to or whatever, like working on the planning and the design of the website one day, to the next day looking at, hey, from an operational standpoint we need to build XYZ processes. And then you learn about how processes are built or how they're mapped and how they're made efficient. And you could then perhaps work closer to the HR team and be like, hey, we got to improve engagement. So in that sense, I honestly, like, you could be doing whatever you really want to do at the end of the day. um so yeah, there are all of these things, and I think if somebody wants to sort of pivot or get into these newer roles, you will have to start with exploring other fields, right? Like learn how to code or learn what design thinking is. And there's this brilliant free IBM design thinking course that exists. If you want to learn how to code, you can go to free code camp, and they give you certification in 300 hours, and those certifications have been recognized by Frank and, like, just name it, right, every other sort of big tech company. If you want to learn how to do data analysis, there are a lot of courses on Coursera and Udemy. You can start there. And at a very, very basic level, you can just be a better Microsoft Office user, right? Just to make your life easier and other people's lives easier. And have that solution mindset. Hey, we're doing this manually. Can this be done better?
Hmm.
And of course, it can be done better because Microsoft O365 is extremely powerful now. And you have a lot of no code automation tools. Literally going to your screen, doing a certain set of steps, the software will record those steps and automate it for you.
Hmm.
Right. So, in that sense, once you start to like put your face in these newer directions, it'll also help you come up with solutions and come up with ideas and come up with these intersections of things, right? Which maybe other people have thought of, maybe they've not thought of, but they are definitely evolving.
Nice. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think in a way you're also talking about how things are changing in so many other fields, right, Shreya? Not just, the field that you're in. And I think this notion of being a lifelong learner is like this larger idea that you're also proposing through the things you're saying, is that no matter what you do at university, when you come out, it's also your responsibility to stay up to date with the other skills you will need to, stay up to date with what the profession demands from you. And I think websites like Coursera, Udemy are great avenues to actually acquire those additional skills, because as soon as you acquire those additional skills, you will notice that a new avenue opens up for you, and you have to just stay on the lookout. And it's also this conversation about designing your own careers, right? Yeah, like you don't have to, be in the same job throughout your life. Maybe you can create a job that you are curious and interested in based on the knowledge and skills that you have, right? And that can be very specific to your industry. And also the fact that no knowledge is wasted in that sense, right? Like whatever knowledge you acquire can build on the new knowledge you learn to actually lead to another pathway. So, we've covered so much. It's just so hard to actually, look at it in so much detail. Shreya, I think you've done a great job really summarizing your thinking in a lot of ways. And, hopefully I can, chat with you 2 or 3 years down the line, Shreya, and see how that's
Definitely.
changed. But what for the viewers, what I really would recommend you to do now is just to look at Prologue's website. Shreya's and her team they have a lot of wonderful resources there for anyone that is in the legal field that wants to explore other opportunities, and also connecting with Shreya, on other social platforms to see how you can take this conversation forward. But Shreya, on a more like candid, casual tone, I'm just curious about, because I know you're someone that reads a lot, you're someone that enjoys watching films. So are there any books that really influenced your thinking in this professional journey, even growing up? Like what were some of your favorite books or films that you would recommend for anyone just watching this to just get a better understanding of what Shreya is like, or something that changed your life in a way.
Um, so I'll start with something that's fairly recent, which is sort of what pivoted my thinking, at least from a career standpoint. Is there's this a person called Richard Susskind, and he works and he tracks the evolution of law. And I think in 2008 or 10, which is 12 years back, right? He wrote this book called Tomorrow's Lawyers, which, if even current lawyers who don't want to sort of pivot really should read. It's talking about where the entire profession is going, and it's completely data packed, and he makes some predictions which have already come true,
Mhm.
right, in that sense, because they are data backed in that sense. So that is one person you should definitely check out, if anybody is interested in this space. Apart from that, in just in terms of books, something that I read, um, something that I discovered recently, because I was trying to just be a better decision maker in that sense. So I started looking at decision making, and I started going to Reddit threads, etc., etc. And there is this person called Shane Parrish. He runs Fernham Street, which is a blog.
This is the
Yeah,
Knowledge Project guy, and he has a really good podcast,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I really like his work. Yeah.
Hmm. So his entire blog is about decision making, and it comes from this entire point where he went to he was also going through this entire crisis, right? He's like, I don't know how I make decisions. Like, how do I make decisions? And he goes and does MBA and realizes it's just another, facade in that sense. Like, practically what happens at universities, we all know. So then he started just spending more time to understand how great thinkers are making decisions and what was influencing them, and just generally how decisions are made. And he has this two-part series. It's called the Great Mental Models.
Mhm.
The first one are just fundamentals, right? So he's just talking about things like the map is not the territory, or you knowing your circle of competence, or having the Socratic method of thinking and asking whys, right? Like, why are you doing this? And the 5 why method. And I'm not going to go into detail because otherwise this conversation is going to go on forever. But that's a book that I think everybody should sort of read and go slow. I would recommend, and try implementing, one thing at a time, try to change, because he does like a to do also, and he has the fundamental basic also sort of written out. So that's definitely one thing. Another thing that you can check out if you're not a book person is on his blog. He has this entire long form with a lot of links, called How to Just Be a Better Decision Maker or something like that. That's something that people can check out if they're interested in that. And yeah, I think those have fairly been the kind of things that I've been reading a lot more about. And just rationality also. So there are these blogs called, there's this blog called Less Wrong, which is about the entire rationalism side of things. And actually got into this entire setup because somebody recommended Slate Star Codex to me, and I started reading that. And from there, I sort of, like, I think, one hoop to the other, and now I'm here. But rationalism may be too strong for a lot of people. But just in terms of mental models, I think this book is a great start.
Nice. Yeah. And what I am going to do is I'm going to link these books and these websites in the show notes. So for anyone listening, you can actually pick up some of these resources in the show notes. Shreya, like, are there any, like, in addition to books, like, were there any lawyers that really influenced you through this journey? Like, someone that you think is really changing the space, according to you, not just in India, but around the world? And a good model for what you can think about as someone that is not only, really strong in the foundational concepts, but also pushing, the limit with regards to what is possible in law. So are there people that you would recommend people look up, just as lawyers or anyone in the legal profession in general?
Definitely. So there is this person called Margaret Hagan, and she, in fact, started this entire intersection of design thinking and law. And she is currently the director or the executive director of the Stanford lab on design thinking. And they're doing some brilliant access to justice projects, right? Because at the end of the day, design thinking says the human is at the end of everything you do. So and it's directly applicable to all access to justice projects, right? Because I'm improving your experience with law. Another person that I recently spoke to, and I think that interview should be up soon, is Joshua Walker. He started Stanford's center called Codex, which is this intersection of computer science and law. And they do a lot of projects on that intersection. And he has a very interesting journey because he started out as a lawyer, and then he became one of the greatest patent lawyers, and then completely pivoted, and did like a project with Stanford. And then he was so convinced with how, data and computer science and legal informatics sort of sit together, and how they can just make the entire field better, that he convinced the Stanford dean at that point of time to build out this center. So yeah, that's another person that you can definitely sort of check out. And there is this third person. Her name is Jayum, and she used to be a pricing strategist at one of the bigger law firms, international law firms. But now she's completely pivoted, and she has a data analysis backed consultancy for lawyers and law firms and other legal organizations called Six Parsecs. And you can actually find things that may be more relatable to you on her Twitter, because she keeps doing these brilliant threads and like trying to break down things based on data. And yeah, that's another person that you can definitely check out. Oh, and like one last person is this really funny person called Alex Su, and he keeps making these memes about, people breaking the mold of who a lawyer should be and how they should act and how they should be. And he apparently became a really famous TikToker in this COVID period. So yeah, funny person, but also has like a lot of things to sort of drive home. So you should check him out as well.
This is awesome, Shreya. Thank you for so much food for thought. And I hope, I think the listeners and even me in general, I think we all got so much, and I think I could take this conversation on for hours and hours just to, understand your thinking on some of these dimensions. But it was really nice chatting with you, Shreya, and understanding your thinking in this space. And I hope this conversation also, gave you a chance to articulate your thinking about some of these things. And I think you do a great job actually breaking down things and making them really simple. So thank you for your work. And I'm really excited to read future posts on Prologue. I am best of luck for that journey there. For the listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please do follow Shreya on all available social media platforms. And I will be linking Prologue in the show notes, which is a great resource to also look into right after this show. Shreya, thank you again for making time for this.
Thanks so much, Abhishek. I think it was great just generally catching up also, but also talk about something that I've just been working out on the sidelines. And I hope more people take bigger risks and, move into these newer professions, because we need you there.
Awesome. On that positive note, this is the end of this episode of Learning Stories. Stay tuned for more such interviews with amazing learners around the world. Until next time, keep learning.